Now that's just bassist.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we will be analyzing Big Band, one of the original characters in the Skullgirls mobile roster. You may or may not have heard people saying that Big Band is the worst character in this game right now, and we're going to go on a deep dive to explore this further. This kind of content is one that I've always wanted to make, so I'm really eager to hear your feedback on this for the future, and I hope this video is going to be new and interesting. So when I say we're gonna analyze Big Band, what exactly do I mean here? In this video, I want to take an in-depth look at the character design of Big Band and analyze how those design choices by the developers have translated into the game. This covers a number of things here, such as Big Band's archetype as a tank, and how the developers have translated this RPG archetype into the fighting game genre in mobile. Then we're gonna take a look at how the game has changed from its initial launch to where we are at now, while highlighting Big Band's performance in the meta throughout the years. Lastly, we'll close with some of my own opinions and ideas on the subject matter. Before we start, I just want to post a disclaimer that this video is based wholly on my own understanding and research. All the information I post here is publicly available in the forums and other public spaces. I do not have any insider knowledge from the developers, and ideas I put here are all of my own personal thoughts unless stated otherwise. So with that out of the way, let's get to the first part of this video, Big Band's character design. Big Band is the archetypal tank character seen in RPGs. He has the highest base health among all characters, and plenty of his abilities grant him armor that further bolster his defensive capabilities. To compensate, his attack is among the lowest of all the other characters, and his large body makes it easier for the opponents to land hits. His marquee ability also furthers this bulk by simply reducing damage by 15%, making Big Band the best at tanking direct hits in defensive teams. Big Band's catalyst, Feudal Resistance, is a really good payoff for this huge bulk, by punishing opponents that cannot deal more than 1% of his health. Combine Feudal Resistance with Armor Rating and Dark Nut, as well as abilities and moves that grant Big Band plenty of armor, and his naturally huge bulk, this catalyst could have been really strong. And in fact, it was very strong in the past, but it got nerfed. But we'll touch on that later. Unfortunately, this is an RPG game, and direct damage is not the only way to deal with your opponent. You can simply bleed the opponent to death or even inflict doom to kill them outright. Aside from Dream Band that has access to immunity, other Big Bands have no protection from these strategies. I believe this is an intended weakness to make up for Big Band's very high bulk, but in the current state of the game, Big Band's high defensive bulk is not even enough to make him good, so this weakness exacerbates his usefulness in defense. The character that is supposed to be the tank and best in defense has fallen off significantly. Even though Big Band is supposed to be the best in defense, this is a fighting game, and simply being a defender will not cut it. He has to have some sort of offensive presence or at least utility to support his low attack. Other characters with a similar attack paradigm as Big Band is Valentine and Squiggly. Valentine has plenty of bleed effects to overcome her low attack stat, while Squiggly has access to Curse and Wither to severely weaken the opponent. What does Big Band have? The first part of his offensive kit is his long combo chains. Big Band can dish out huge amounts of combos very easily. However, the game has evolved where long combo chains are actually detrimental and not that great. For example, we have Annie, which is a character that thrives in long combo chains, and she is far from a great character, but at least she has tools that allows her to play differently and is rewarded for those long combo chains. Aside from Epic Sax that gains a buff and damage bonus for every combo hit, no other Big Band is rewarded for achieving this. The only reward you get is a charge rate for your prestige ability, which, when activated, empowers Big Band's dash attack. And this brings me to the next part of his offensive kit, empowered dash attacks. Big Band can dash and absorb one hit from his character ability, making it slightly more difficult to intercept him. Once his prestige ability is activated, his dash attack also has a chance to be unblockable and grants him enrage for 5 seconds. Both these abilities allow Big Bang to be quite aggressive through unblockable attacks and makes it easier for Big Bang to start his combo chains. Finally, the last piece of Big Bang's offensive kit is the ability to stun the opponent. He has plenty of moves and blockbusters to do this, which in conjunction with his empowered dash attacks makes landing hits to the opponent very easy. But the problem still persists. So what if you can start landing hits when the opponent gains plenty of buffs like armor and auto block from those hits? The biggest drawback of Big Bang's offensive kit is that he has zero utility to deal with buffs and provides no alternative way to deal damage. In the past, when the game first launched, this wouldn't have been a problem, and I think Big Bang's design was thought out very well. But the game has evolved so much. We have more buffs to deal with, more strategies to work with, and more variants to use with extravagant abilities. So for the next part, let's take a look at Big Bang's relevance in the meta and how the evolution of the game has not been kind to the big guy. So just as a disclaimer here, what I mean by meta history is Rift Battles, and unfortunately, I only started playing the game after Rift Battles was introduced. I don't really have much knowledge on how the meta was like back in the day, but I would assume the game was much simpler, especially since catalysts were not released in the same update. So we're gonna skip this part and jump to the update where catalysts got introduced, the 3.2 update. Catalyst brought a whole new dynamic to Rift Battles, and the synergies brought by this new collectible made Rift significantly more challenging or even broken at one point. Actually, the first time catalysts were introduced, armor rating was a very problematic catalyst as its ability provided every defensive team Resident Evil's first signature ability. While this made defensive teams really strong, this made Big Bang nodes especially strong in conjunction with his massive HP bulk and his own character catalyst Feudal Resistance. In the past, Feudal Resistance inflicts the opponent with Death Mark and damage if they are unable to deal more than 1% of Big Bang's max health. Back then, the synergy with this and armor rating, as well as other armor granting catalysts such as Dark Knot and Frost Armor, made defensive Big Bangs like Resident Evil and Heavy Metal quite potent in defense. These two were the best, as they can also gain armor from their abilities too. You had to use armor break, buff removal, or a very strong offensive variant to make a dent against Big Bang. This was the golden age of Big Bang that was unfortunately very short-lived. In the next 3.3 update, armor rating got a huge nerf where it only activates when the combo counter is above 10 hits. It is meant to punish weak multi-hitting characters in favor of low hit count strategies. The thing is, multi-hitting characters is an effective death sentence against Feudal Resistance and Big Bang. You never want to use it in the first place. Armor rating as the best general catalyst for Big Bang was immediately removed from viability, and this catalyst have never seen the light ever since, even today. However, the next incoming nerfs were much brutal than this. Update 4.0 brought a slew of new changes. The first one is a nerf to Feudal Resistance. While the catalyst still retains its unique damage reflect ability, it is now conditional and only activates when Big Bang is above 50% health. This is honestly a pretty healthy nerf and still makes Big Bang a respectable threat. The only problem is that this update also comes with the new substat changes. For those of you who just joined the game recently, the stats of this game had gotten a massive overhaul. In the past, we have substats that resist various debuffs like Cripple Resist and Bleed Resist. These have now been consolidated into one resistance substat and filled with new substats such as Special Cooldown, Tag Cooldown, Accuracy, and most importantly, Piercing. I want to talk about Piercing because I do think that the introduction of this substat essentially killed Big Bang. Piercing is a direct counter to defense, which is affected by armor. Having maximum Piercing means you no longer deal 0 damage against an opponent with 5 stacks of armor. Big Bang's niche of having a huge bulk and tons of armor to activate Feudal Resistance was hit with a double whammy. And ever since this nerf, you will never see Feudal Resistance as a viable catalyst anymore. Most top players will have access to Piercing as it is now a very important stat to have. I do think that the addition of Piercing was a good change because it gave the advantage to the player instead of the AI. This allowed more challenging and unique abilities to be introduced, like Splitting Image Signature ability, and opens up the meta to more interesting strategies that is not all just about high big damage. So with all these nerfs, where does that leave Big Bang? Thankfully, both of Big Band's diamond variants, Heavy Metal and Dream Band, are water and light element, which are undoubtedly the two strongest elements in defensive teams. Their high bulk as a big band and synergy with the elemental catalyst have allowed them to still be a decent choice for defense if you do not have anything better. Resident Evil has pretty much died off since silver base stats can no longer compete in rift battles against diamond variants with the piercing substat. However, even though Heavy Metal and Dream Band are fine defenders, they are far from the best. The introduction of variants like Plot Twisted, Splitting Image, and Model Leader have pushed Big Band's best defenders into the sidelines as more unique defenders with tricky abilities come into play. Having a huge HP bulk is no longer enough. The meta has recently shifted and focused on reflect damage, with Painwheels leading the fray. It's ironic how the character that is supposed to be the glass cannon with small HP is now the leading defensive character in the game, not the archetypal tank. Some changes are desperately needed, and we need it soon. So let's brainstorm some of these changes. For the recommended changes, we will be dividing this into several subsections. First, let's tackle his catalyst Feudal Resistance. Given the addition of piercing and possibly other quality of life changes on moves potentially coming later, I think the nerf to Feudal Resistance can use a little buff. I don't think reverting back to its original form is a good idea, as it makes Final Stand a very strong buff to use together, and Final Fight the Catalyst is already a very strong and popular general catalyst to use. I will say maybe instead of 50%, we can buff it down to 35% or even 25%, just a small buff to make it better. I think in terms of catalyst, this will suffice, but I do want to acknowledge Randomizer's idea in the forums where they added another line. When Big Band's health drops below 50%, remove all debuffs and gain permanent armor. I really like this idea. Debuff cleansing is powerful, but it's not that powerful, and I mean, Model Leader can already cleanse debuff every 20 seconds. I do want to caution on the permanent armor though, as it could potentially be too strong with Frost Armor, which is already one if not the best defensive element in this game. It makes sense for the other big bands, but Heavy Metal existing do make me worry. Aside from Feudal Resistance, I don't really want to talk about the other non-character specific catalysts, since they can be used for general use and can potentially make the strong defenders broken. I do, however, want to give a mention to Crippled Decker, as it was a fairly used catalyst alongside Feudal Resistance in the past. Cripple is a very underused debuff and it's kind of bad, but it can be quite good with Feudal Resistance together. However, I think the debuff is best suited as part of a variant's signature ability rather than used as a catalyst slot, and we'll get to variants just a bit later. Next, we're going to move to Big Band's abilities, starting with his character and prestige ability that empowers his dash attack. I honestly don't have a problem with these abilities and I think they are generally fine. We don't need to have elaborate character abilities. However, I do have a problem with the conditions of his prestige ability. Big Band charges his prestige ability on every 10th combo hit, and the charge rate is only 70%. That means that Big Band will need to deal at least 60 combo hits to be able to use it well. While this is fine for offensive use, it is still quite steep for a cost. On defense, it is literally impossible for the AI to activate it. The conditions needs to change. The thing is, using a weak multi-hit character is already a bad idea against Big Band. I don't think it's necessary to double down and punish them further. Instead, we should punish the alternative playstyle of strong low hit burst damage. So I suggest changing the combo hits into a simple knockdown. Big Band charges this ability every time he or the opponent gets knocked down. The charge rate can stay or can potentially get buffed to 20%. Numbers are easy to change, so don't dwell too much on it. I think this is better gameplay wise and fits Big Band's lore where he was beaten down when he was a cop and got back up stronger than ever before into a crime fighting hero. Also, as a defender, I think having a prestige ability that can be used in defense is also a really good idea. Then we have his marquee ability. Frankly, the only problematic one here is Soloist. This marquee ability is only useful in single nodes in rift battles and is nearly useless everywhere else. Given how much weaker he got after the introduction of piercing, I think it's safe to simply combine the two marquee abilities together and give Big Bang a much needed defensive boost. A straight 15% inherent defense, no condition. I don't believe this is too strong, but if it is, we can always put a condition based on his max health, just like Feudal Resistance. Interestingly, this opens up the other marquee ability to be anything we want. Like other characters, we could have an offensive one here to boost his stat offensive kit. Keeping up with the theme of a simple stat increase, this could be in the form of a straight 15% attack boost or even a straight 15% piercing boost to mirror his other defensive marquee ability. But personally, I feel like doubling down on his defensive attribute is more appropriate, given his supposed design and role. Maybe something like a 15% increase in HP and resistance. It's simple and straightforward, and I think it fits the big guy. With abilities out of the way, we're moving forward now to his moves. I'm going to be honest here by saying that I'm not too familiar with the game mechanics of Big Bang's movesets, so we're just going to look at the effect of his moves to get a glimpse on Big Bang's kit. As a defender, obviously Big Bang has plenty of armor in his kit and can also inflict cripple to bolster his defenses. He also has access to meter, but this is restricted on a BB3 and only after defeating an opponent. On the offensive side, Big Bang has a 1-off 6-second bleed and a whole lot of stun. There's also some moves that grant damage boost through certain conditions, but overall, that is the extent of Big Bang's kit, which is honestly very lacking. For suggestions on buffs, I highly recommend taking a look at this Twitter thread by Melon here. Melon's a big time Big Bang main and know the ins and outs of his character and gameplay, so I trust their judgment and suggestions. You can read about the details of their suggested changes in the description down below, but just to summarize things, these are suggestions on things that Big Bang needs: armor break, meter control, buff control, and regen. You'll notice that most of these are offensive traits, and that's because the offensive side of Big Bang is in very desperate need of a fix. In terms of moves, Big Bang's defensive kit seems fine since you will rely more on abilities and modifiers for defenders. Offensively though, stuns and multiple combo hits are simply not enough, and having access to armor break and some kind of meter control would really be beneficial for Big Bang. I'll highlight some of my favorite changes here. The first is Giant Step, which is an odd one single hit move that guarantees critical hits. Frankly, I've never liked these kind of moves, but they usually have uses as high damage moves or combo extenders in other characters. For Big Bang though, it's a super awkward move that is hard to combo with, and I think changing the effect completely to be a buff removal tool is a neat idea. Not every character should be able to remove buffs, but one bad buff removal tool could go a long way for the big guy. The second is Take the A-Train, which grants armor. I don't think it makes sense to get armor after using a blockbuster that is best used offensively, so Melon's suggestion on turning it as a meter control tool feels very appropriate. And third is Timpani Drive, which deals extra damage against stun opponents. While stun is a neat tool for Big Bang, I agree that the damage boost here is near useless. Changing the effect to inflict armor break is a stronger form of damage increase, nullifies armor buffs, and I think it fits the cinematic of beating the opponent down like a drum. Finally, my favorite change is Tuba Tuba. Although a strong BB3, its effect is unfortunately the worst possible kind of effect. The chances to stun is useless when the blockbuster has a long cinematic animation. By the time the move is completed, the opponent is no longer stunned, so you end up using a blockbuster with no effect. The idea here is to inflict armor break is just simple and again a nice change for extra damage, but the ability to reduce meter per hit is also a great one as well. Either one can work. This is of course just barely scratching the surface of the changes on Big Bang's moves. We know in the past from Valentine's and Phileas update that some moves can be upgraded to work in the air or make combo routes easier. I'm not going too deep into this, but Melon does have ideas of their own about which moves could be improved. Regardless, I think it's fair to say that Big Bang's moveset is an area that is in need of critical attention and needs to get improved, especially on the offensive side. Next is variants, and overall, I think Big Bang's variants are mostly at the right spot. Signature abilities are only one part of the whole kit, and it's the other parts of Big Bang's kit that requires upgrades. With that said, however, I think there are two variants in particular that could really use a buff: Private Dick and GI Jazz. These two variants are oldies that have been around in the game since the very beginning. However, their signature abilities still remain roughly the exact same with very minimal changes. The revert of Epic Sack's nerf shows how far this game has evolved, and Private Dick and G.I. Jazz has unfortunately not kept up with the times. Let's start with Private Dick. He got a change in Update 2.0 to resist all debuffs instead of just stun. God, what an awful ability, and I'm glad that it can resist all debuffs now. The only problem is that Private Dick only resists debuffs inflicted through signature abilities. Debuffs from catalysts and modifiers are not affected, which renders this ability useless. In the current meta, most defenders don't care about inflicting debuffs on you. It's catalysts like Blockbusted, Hexy Time, and Curse of Knowledge that makes your life harder. The first quality of life change will be for Private Dick's resistance to also include debuffs from catalysts and modifiers as well. Second, Melon suggests that he gets a stat rework. As it currently stands, he has a poor 8.8k base attack, but a pretty respectable 76k HP. Private Dick could be a really cool offensive big ban that can infinitely stun opponents to death while resisting debuffs, but as it stands, he appears to be built for defense, and we all know that Fire Element is possibly the worst element for defenders. I do agree that Private Dick is better suited for offensive use, and if a stat rework is not possible, then I suggest giving him something additional to his first signature ability. Big Ben has plenty of moves to stun, and Private Dick's ability to stun feels slightly redundant. I think in addition to this ability, there should be another sentence that provides advantages when facing against stunned opponents. Something like Starcross second ability that grants bonus blockbuster damage against stunned opponents. Maybe just to fit with the Fire Element theme, he could gain Enrage instead whenever he stuns an opponent. Something along those lines, I'm not quite sure. Next is G.I. Jazz, and this is a variant that never got changed ever since his release. He is a simple tank that gains a bunch of armor and regen when his health is low, returning him back to almost full health. This ability is really there to simply delay the fight and nothing else. However, the reliance on buffs is detrimental because it is so easily removed. G.I. Jazz has one of the highest health in the game, and I think it's a big shame that he gets countered so easily through bleeds. Both Melon and I had the same idea of simply combining his two abilities into one and then give him a completely new second ability to enhance his viability. But to make sure that it doesn't get deleted easily, we'll turn the armor and regen into permanent buffs for 10 seconds. For his second ability, there's a lot of ways to go with this. I personally like the idea of keeping him as a true defender and give him a strong defensive ability that synergizes with his health regen later. My idea is to make G.I. Jazz really tanky in the beginning and he gets significantly weaker once his health is down. Then, his first ability can activate to get his health back up and return him back to that super tanky state. It's funny because Melon and I actually came up with the exact same ability at the same time, where at above 50% health, G.I. Jazz has 2 permanent stacks of armor. This is a simple damage reduction ability that goes well with the delay tactic that G.I. Jazz is striving for. It is still counterable with permanent bleed Philia, or standout, or even curse to prevent the first ability from activating, so I don't think it's that strong. Furthermore, this ability will synergize with the air element catalyst into thin air to make blockbuster finish even harder in rift battles. I think aside from Private Dick and G.I. Jazz, all the other variants are well designed for current standards. I personally love the change they make up to Troublemaker, as it makes him a bit of a threat with the reflect damage. However, there's still plenty of cool mechanics and defensive themes that can be added to Big Ban's variants. Instead of adding them up to the current roster, I think it's more appropriate to reserve these for new variants, which brings us to our final section of this video. So this last part is really just a spitball of random ideas in our heads. We're not going to delve too much into this and we'll try to keep it as short as possible. The first idea is Melon's and revolves around Big Ban's ability to parry. Parry is a skill for Big Ban in second Encore where he basically blocks and can counter the opponent's combos. In mobile, this was translated into noise cancel and also his character ability that can absorb one hit without being interrupted. So the idea behind this ability is to reward players through using Big Ban's character ability and dash attacks by providing them armor and enrage. The timer for Enrage is reset every time Big Bang successfully counters the opponent's attack with his own, and at 5 seconds of Enrage, he gains permanent precision. I'm not too sure how the wording works, and I think introducing parry might confuse the majority of the player base, so I thought it's probably going to be something along the lines of this. When hitting an attacking opponent with a dash attack, gain Enrage and armor for 15 seconds. Timer for Enrage is reset for every successful dash attack. While at 5 seconds of Enrage, gain permanent precision. I really like this ability, and I think it's a new fresh take on an offensive big band. So far, offensive big bands like Epic Sax and Vintage Virtuoso revolves a lot on combo hits, which is fine but slightly boring. Megasonic is an odd one that is the exact opposite, as he relies on low combo hits. Going away from the combo hits and focusing on dash attacks is a breath of fresh air and synergizes really well with Big Band's character and prestige ability. So next is my own idea, and unlike Melon, I really only have one ability and is meant to be used in both offense and defense. Big Band is the archetypal tank character and has very huge bulk, but he is countered really easily with tons of debuffs like Doom and Bleed. So my idea is simple. Let's have a Big Band that forces the player to damage him only through direct hits by negating all non-direct hits. Big Band can only be damaged by direct hits. I think this simple sentence has vast implications and is very powerful, as it really puts Big Band's naturally high bulk in the very center. It negates Bleed and Doom, but also negates reflect damage from Thorns, Don't Poke the Bear Catalyst, and signature abilities like Immoral Fiber. I envision this ability to be on a Fire Diamond Big Band that can be used in both offense and defense. Those are really the two abilities I wanted to show. Feel free to comment down below if you have any ideas of your own. With that said, it's time to close this video with some final thoughts. Big Band is a tank character with a naturally high bulk in defense and pitiful small attack. As one of the original roster characters in this game, his design was very simple and utilizes a lot of armor for defense and combo hits and stun for offense. Unfortunately, this simple design has been eclipsed by the recent changes in the game, in particular, the introduction to piercing. Even though his defenses have significantly fallen, there has not been any changes or updates to improve his old kit, and he is now possibly the worst character in the game. I personally don't think Big Band is that far off as being a great defender again. He just needs a few tweaks to his existing kit to make him better, and several new variants as well. However, his offensive kit is severely lacking and needs a big change to make him at least decent or usable. In this video, we've talked at length about ways to improve his kit, from his abilities to his moves, catalysts, as well as current variants. Hopefully this was an entertaining video. Let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. And finally, I just want to say a huge thanks to Melon, the creator of Big Ham, that engaged with this discussion. I had fun brainstorming ideas with them, and y'all should check them out for sure. So that is going to be all for me. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a nice day ahead, and I'll see you in the next video.